The Blood Pact. The farmer who became rich, but his family lives were taken.
In the heart of a forgotten land, where the sun seldom shone brightly enough to warm the bones, lay a village lost in time, its name nearly forgotten, its people mere whispers in the wind. The earth was dry, the river had not run true for generations, and the fields, oh, those once fertile fields, they now lay as barren as the dreams of those who toiled upon them. The air was thick with an ancient silence, the kind that only the truly desperate can hear.
It was here that Mthokozisi, a farmer by trade and a dreamer by heart, lived. His hands, calloused from years of hard labor, had never known anything but struggle. His shack, a modest thing made of mud and straw, stood in the shadow of a world that seemed to have forgotten what hope felt like. And yet, every night as he lay on his worn-out bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, Mthokozisi's heart burned with an unshakable desire. The hunger for something more. A life beyond the endless toil, beyond the hunger, beyond the pain. Little did he know that hunger would lead him down a path from which there was no return. Mthokozisi's transformation. One fateful evening, when the winds of fortune seemed to blow colder than usual, Mthokozisi found himself standing alone in the middle of his desolate fields. His children, pale and hungry, slept under tattered blankets, their innocent faces twisted with hunger in their dreams. His wife, Nokuthula, could barely look him in the eye anymore, her once hopeful gaze now clouded by sorrow. But Mthokozisi, the dreamer, refused to surrender to despair. There was something in him, something primal, something wild, that could not accept a life of poverty. He had heard the old stories. He had listened to the whispers of the villagers, those ancient tales of a mystical river, its waters said to run red as blood, and of the power it could bestow upon those brave or foolish enough to seek its dark promise. That night, as the moon hung heavy and blood-red in the sky, he made a decision that would shatter his very soul. The ritual. The night was unnaturally still, as though the very earth held its breath in anticipation. At the stroke of midnight, Mthokozisi made his way to the cursed river, guided by nothing but the haunting whispers of the wind. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, the very ground beneath his feet trembling as if aware of the pact he was about to make. The village, still and lifeless, was miles behind him, swallowed by the darkness. And then he saw it. The river, so familiar, so terrifying, stretched before him, its waters glowing a deep crimson, as though blood itself flowed through its veins. The night was heavy with an unnatural energy, as though the land itself was alive, watching, waiting. The river, once dry and withered, now roared, with a presence that seemed to mock the emptiness of the world around it. Shadows danced across the water's surface, like twisted spirits beckoning him closer. And there, standing at the edge of the river, was the figure. A figure draped in darkness, its form indistinct, yet suffused with an undeniable power. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed with an otherworldly fire, and its voice, when it finally spoke, was like the sound of 1,000 souls crying out in agony. The deal with the devil. The figure spoke then, its voice chillingly smooth, like the rustle of dead leaves in an autumn wind. A life for a life, it intoned, its words laced with a promise of unimaginable power. I offer you all that your heart desires. Wealth beyond measure, the respect of kings, the adoration of the masses. In exchange, you will give what you hold most dear. Your flesh, your blood, your soul, everything you have ever loved. The price is steep, but the reward... It paused, the figure seeming to savor the weight of its words. The reward will be more than you could ever imagine. Mthokozisi's breath hitched. His mind screamed in protest, but his heart burned with the unbearable heat of his desires. "I accept," he whispered, his voice barely audible, lost in the howling wind. The moment the words left his lips, the river surged. A pulse of blinding red light exploded from its depths, and Mthokozisi was engulfed in an overwhelming force, like the very soul of the earth itself was being ripped apart. And then, as quickly as it had started, the world went still. Before him lay a chest, gilded in gold, filled to the brim with treasures that glittered with an otherworldly brilliance. Jewels, coins, rare artifacts, all of it his. But what was the cost? Could he ever pay the price for such riches? Only time would tell. The price of greed. In the days that followed, Mthokozisi's life transformed in ways he could scarcely comprehend. The fields, once barren, now yielded crops that seemed to grow with unnatural speed. His once modest shack was replaced with a mansion, opulent, grand, a symbol of his newfound power. No man in the village had ever seen such wealth, and soon whispers of Mthokozisi's fortune spread like wildfire. But as the riches flowed, so too did a sense of dread. His children, once vibrant and full of life, began to fade. Their skin grew pale, their energy drained, their bodies weakening by the day. And his wife, the woman who had once stood beside him through thick and thin, began to look at him with an expression that cut him deeper than any blade. Fear. Fear of what he had become. Fear of what they had lost. The first loss. The first child to fall ill was Lindiwe, his eldest daughter. She awoke one morning with a fever so fierce that the very air seemed to burn around her. No healer, no remedy, no prayer could save her. As Mthokozisi knelt by her side, tears streaming down his face, he realized the truth he had tried to ignore. The pact, the dark, terrible bargain he had made, had come with a price. A life for a life. His wealth had been purchased with the lives of his children. Each month, the river claimed a piece of them. And Lindiwe, his sweet, innocent girl, was the first to be taken. The curse unfolds. The days stretched into a nightmare. Mthokozisi watched as his children withered away, their laughter silenced, their once bright eyes dimming. His mansion, so full of life with the laughter of his family, now stood as a hollow monument to his ambition. The gold, the jewels, the power, none of it mattered anymore. Nothing could replace what he had lost. The river, that cursed river, seemed to mock him with every step he took. It had given him everything he had ever wanted, and in return, it took everything he ever loved. The final bargain. Desperation led him back to the river, his final hope, his last plea for redemption. But the figure, more monstrous than before, greeted him with a cruel smile. "You have already paid the price, Mthokozisi," it sneered. "Your children's lives were but the beginning, and now you will join them in the depths of the river, forever." Mthokozisi fell to his knees, his heart breaking, his soul crushed beneath the weight of his own choices. "Please," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "Take me. Spare them." The figure's laugh echoed like 1,000 screams, and the river surged one last time, claiming him in a torrent of red. His cries, his pleas, lost to the abyss, the legacy of the Blood Pact. And so Mthokozisi was swallowed by the river, his body lost to the red waters that had promised him everything and taken everything in return. His mansion, once a symbol of his triumph, now stood in ruins, overgrown by vines as if nature itself had rejected the legacy of his greed. The village, once forgotten, had learned the cost of ambition. The river, still flowing with its sinister glow, stands as a silent reminder to those who dare to dream too wildly. Some pacts are better left unmade. Some prices are too steep to pay.